Hello, so today I'm going to take a quick look at the 1990s French body armour. Now, I don't have the Kevlar filler for this or the plate, but I just wanted to have a look at the actual jacket. Because this is from that sort of interesting period before sort of the plate carriers of all the webbing became the standard thing. So this is from the sort of same period of, the US Pasca or the British ECBA or just the regular CBA, where you just had either soft Kevlar body armour that was replacing sort of old ballistic nylon flak jackets, which sometimes, as well as having the Kevlar soft bits, ones like these had a actual plate slot in them, sometimes front and back. This one doesn't have a rear plate slot, but it does have one on the front. So the idea is obviously you're not expected to be shot in the back anyway, but obviously, as we've come to know, most modern body armours tend to now have a front and rear plate, even if the rear plate's smaller. But this one actually has quite a hefty sized plate slot in it. So I haven't actually measured it, but I'm assuming it would have been the size of this. So probably about a chopping board size, for anybody wondering, small chopping board, which is actually a fairly good size for a ballistic plate. That's definitely bigger than the ECBA's plate. The ECBA plate would be a little bit bigger than this pouch here, which I guess is just a utility pouch on the front. So if I can find where the zip's hidden under here. Again, trying to film it with one hand as I'm just doing this one, because it's a relatively short video and I don't know loads about this armour. Because annoyingly I couldn't find out much from sort of wikiing and googling about these. I could find stuff about older and more modern French armour, but not this stuff. So yeah, there's your plate pouch, which as you can see is pretty sizable actually. If you bought one of these and weren't using it as armour or whatever, you could just put something else in there, just use it as a storage pocket. So there's that. So definitely bigger than the ECBA plates. I don't know what level of plates these were rated for, but even if you're getting these, you wouldn't need obviously the original French plates. You could just take a measurement of one of these, which again I can put in a description later if I remember, if I get a sort of ruler out, figure it out. And you could obviously just buy a ballistic plate of roughly the right size online. If you got one a bit smaller, you could obviously just put some padding around it to make sure it doesn't slip around inside the plate slot, and then you'd still have a fairly good hefty size of protection. Because like I said, the ECBA plate I quite like, and although that only covers your heart and a bit of your lungs, depending on obviously the size of your chest, because the plates didn't change size in those. But that wasn't designed as a plate carrying vest really, it was just sort of soft armour with little plates. This has quite a good front bit. Obviously, as I said, it doesn't have a rear plate. Now, obviously, these sort of armours are always intended to be used really with rigging over the top of them. So, which is why you can see there and there, where you'd have put your actual Kevlar panels in. So it does seem like this. Oh, actually, no, that's one continuous big panel by the look of it. Yeah, because you've got the zips end there, and the zips start there. So it looks like, yeah, you'd have, or maybe it would have been in two halves. Hard to say. But it was probably either, yeah, you'd struggle, wouldn't you, to have a big bit of Kevlar go across like that. See, I'd assume that you unzip the left side and you have two separate fillers for, not necessarily front and back, but, back left and front left or whatever, and back right, front right or whatever. I'd assume that's how it works without actually seeing the Kevlar panel. I don't know. Bit of a weird way of doing it, but if it works, it works. I would wonder though with that if the Kevlar panels were made to be a size so they overlapped. So there's a thing there. I'd assume there's nothing in this pocket. No. So there would have been, by the look of it, the guide, I assume, is the instructions. A bit like the Pasca has that little pouch with an instructions thing, but I assume that's just how the armour's meant to work. Obviously, as you can see, it just basically, this armour, when you're wearing it, it just clips up with buckles. I assume, yeah, the buckles are on the back. So this one was in relatively good condition. It was a bit smelly when I got it, but it didn't really look like it'd ever been used, because obviously how unfaded the camo is. So I just put it through the washing machine with some fabric softener, and washing powder, so it just smelt nice. It might just be storage smell, to be honest. So yeah, the only label on it says Paul Boy 1996 GT. I don't know if GT is actually the name of the armour. But again, I did see some pictures actually where these things did look like they were actually later, kind of before France went to the proper sort of modern armour as we know it now, with all the sort of webbing on it and everything built into the armour. It did look like they did a bit like what the Polish armour did that I've got, where they kind of did a version of this which then had more stuff strapped on, so you could start clipping on more bits of armour or like more rigging to the actual stuff. And it then looks like now they've gone to essentially more modern systems. So to give you a size comparison, And that's it next to, what's it, this, the old British Osprey Mark II, I think it's called, isn't it, this one? But yeah, that's the difference between this and that one. So as you can see, the Osprey looks a bit smaller, but I think that's just how it sits. But again, this is actually a plate carrier. But again, I do like this one. And again, obviously not wearing them with the armour in and the plates, I wouldn't know, you know, the weight difference of them and the overall comfort. But because I saw some of these being used in Ukraine by, what would you call them, territorial defence units, I don't think they were the actual proper Ukrainian army ones. I saw those and I thought, well, that looks like the French camo, and then I looked up on eBay, you know, I was able to find some of it. They did this in a woodland pattern as well. I can't remember the name of the French woodland and the desert pattern off the top of my head, you know, like their equivalent of DPM 95, but it's quite a good pattern. The colours are quite good on both versions. So yeah, it's, like I said, just one of those interesting bits of body armour if you're interested in body armour. That this is one of the ones that, you know, came somewhere between, you know, like the actual kind of evolution from going from the early sort of Kevlar ones to Kevlar with plate pockets in them, essentially, to the armour most armies are sort of using today. So I just thought it was interesting, and because there was one on eBay that was relatively cheap, and I said, other than it being a bit sort of storage smelly when it got here, quite a cool thing to own, because sometimes these are actually just quite good jackets, even if you don't, like I say, don't intend to use them as armour. I know a lot of people like these sort of just to get to have the massive storage pockets in them, especially things like this one, because obviously it's got the plate one on. But I've seen people with old like flak jacket type things using them as like fishing vests as well. So there's definitely multiple uses for these, even if you don't want to use them as armour. But as I said, only issue you might have if you got one of these is finding a Kevlar filler without cutting up some Kevlar yourself that actually fits it properly, because it does seem like they've done a weird system. You know, normally I'm more used to armour having like a front and back panel rather than the left and right panel like this one seems to. Again, it would be doable. You could just, I imagine, put a front and back panel in, and then you just wouldn't have any shoulder protection that way. Or you could then perhaps get some of like the shoulder Kevlar stuff from another one's thing. Like, you know, if you had the brassards or whatever they called them on this one, I've basically clipped most of the bits off of this armour, but this had all the bits where it clipped on. You could basically take those sort of bits of shoulder or neck armour kind of bits off and put them there. Also, there would have been a Kevlar neck filler in this one as well. So I assume, again, you could find something to fill that up with that's a relatively similar size. I just actually thought, I wonder if... Only thing I have noticed in this armour, there isn't one of those recovery sort of things on the back, you know, but again, that might have been on the rigging, you know, where you can drag somebody if they're wounded or whatever. Just put the camera down a second. What I am wondering... And the answer's no. I was just wondering, because it's just literally for putting the little neck ring of Kevlar in. I was just wondering if the shoulder bits were filled in through that bit, because that would actually make more sense if they'd have made that as, you know, the shoulder... Well, it wouldn't necessarily make more sense, but you know what I mean, where you had it attached. But again, most modern armour systems now just seem to have a front Kevlar panel, a back Kevlar panel, and then, you know, they might be a certain shape so they overlap properly. And then you have your front and back plates typically now. But I just find some of these sort of, you know, armours of like the 90s or whatever quite interesting, where they were sort of evolving every sort of few years to become, like we're saying, the more standard infantry type armour sort of plate carriers that we see today with all the rigging on.